Thank you. Welcome everyone to ACDE number 218. Couple things on the agenda today. So on the Fusaka side, we'll discuss what is the latest with devnet 4 and how the issue has been diagnosed and where to go from here. Can also discuss the timelines going forward. And then on Glamsterdam, we wanted to finalize the discussion around the headliners that we have been having over the past couple of weeks. And I think after that, it's probably worth discussing what we expect as the scope for the fork or potential timelines and how we want to think about that. And then Tony had some updates on block access lists, and I think Jared had some questions to discuss as well. If we have time beyond that, Mikhail had an update on SafeHead, and then there were two EIPs that people wanted to bring up. But to kick us off, I don't know if Barnabas is on the call. Do you want to give an update on devnet 4 and what happened there?
Sure. So devnet 4 launched last week Friday, and we went through a successful full transition. We went through successful BPO1, BPO2. And then once we hit BPO3, we started seeing some issues regarding gas and Aragon. Their basic calculation for the blob fee was different than every other EL, and therefore they decided to fork off. Gas issue has been resolved since. Aragon, as far as I know, they're still looking into it, and we still need to discuss exactly how we want to process this. And in the meantime, we also saw some issues on the CL side, especially Lighthouse. Lighthouse had a hard time finding peers and finding valid peers, and they had issues blocking invalid peers. They're currently still investigating. They're just unable to sync up to head at this point. That is the two main factors. Unfortunately, all of our boot nodes were Lighthouse and gas pairs, and this also caused some issues in initial peering, in finding the peers. Since then, we have changed half of our boot nodes into Prism and gas, and but we still have some issues regarding filling up the boot nodes with peer lists. Hopefully, we can get into a finalized chain by maybe end of today and do BPO5 tomorrow.
Thanks. And I guess to get back to a finalized chain, do we expect like a lot of the validators to get slashed, or what will be the process?
No, so ideally we want to have a fixed Lighthouse image, because a pretty big portion of the network is Lighthouse. We also have some issues with Nimbus supernodes, unable to fetch any valid peers. Once either Nimbus or Lighthouse manage to get the supernodes back up and running, then we should be able to finalize. A huge portion of the network is controlled by supernodes, just like mainnet would, basically. So even if none of the full nodes are working, only the supernodes should be able to finalize.
Got it. There's a question by Marius asking how far away we are from a Lighthouse image. I don't know if anyone from Lighthouse is on the call.
Yeah, like we have tested out a bunch of fixes, but we still haven't we haven't been able to reliably sync yet. So yeah, we have a few more ideas now that we are going to test, and yeah, hopefully we have something out by in a couple of hours that at least like syncs given like certain conditions or something like that of having supernodes.
Thanks. And was Lighthouse the only CL client that had issues after the bug, or were there other teams with issues?
So Nimbus also is having issues right now. Still, they as I mentioned, they don't have many peers, and also quite some supernodes are offline.
Okay. And are we waiting or expecting a fix from Nimbus as well for this?
Yeah, I also reached out to them. Also, there was quite some very deep reorgs, and Nethermind got stuck in a reorg loop for some client pairs. But they are also investigating, but they said that it's most likely caused by debugging Lighthouse.
I see. And then on the EL side, so Barnabas, you had a proposal, or at least a summary of the discussion in terms of what to do about the update fraction calculation. Does everyone agree with what you proposed? Then I'll post it in the chat. But yeah, Andrew.
Well, as I mentioned in the chat, I think that we should actually make a different choice. We should, like at the moment, it seems to me that we want to prioritize implementation simplicity over protocol consistency, but I think that's the wrong decision, because if we go to the current implementation in Nethermind and Wrath and Bezu, the problem is that it's just inconsistent. It uses a blob-based fee that is not an actual blob-based fee of any block. And I understand that it is slightly more difficult to implement the consistent version, but I think, again, it's just, to me, it sounds like we haven't made any hard fork on a public testnet yet, so we still have time to do it properly. And to my mind, like, to do it properly is to make the things easy on the consistent on the protocol side, rather than prioritize implementation over protocol consistency.
Okay, there's some comments by Francesco and Life Science in the chat. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has opinions on this. And sorry, like, yeah, okay, I got confused with Barnabas's message. So the message I posted is not the same thing, but on the fix for the current devnet 4 bug, yeah, Ben?
Yeah, so the two ways of doing it are using the blob parameters from the current block or the blob parameters from the parent block. And if you use the one from the current block, then when a fork happens, the parameters change. Whereas if you use it from the parent block, you have to wait 2 blocks after a fork for all the changes to have occurred. So yeah, it seems better to alter the parameters. Otherwise, we need to change the spec to be parameter based rather than constant based. This.
Thanks. Felix?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I mean, this is directed at Ben. So you have brought this argument like multiple times that, like, you know, it takes an additional block for the fork to like take effect. But I don't really see that as, like, I don't fully understand this argument. Like, what's the issue with it, or what's the?
Because you're both on the current fork and also the prior fork for some of the parameters.
So it's basically that what your argument is, that the client has to be aware of both forks parameters, or
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a huge issue either way, but we have to decide one way of doing it.
Let's see. Yeah, my side.
Yeah, I just want to say, I feel like after looking into this a bit more, I also kind of agree with Ben and the choice to have the parameters come into effect on the fork block. I think I recall we actually discussed something extremely similar to this during Pectra with the blob throughput increase, because the update fraction did also change there. And I think what we ended up doing is we changed it on the fork block, which is why everybody has access to the head block time to make that change. So I think it's actually more consistent to do what Ben is saying here. The question that I have is that yes, it's an unnatural block base fee, but we could resolve that by changing 7918 to calculate its value based on the current header's excess blob gas instead of the parent, because this is how blob base fee is computed for the EVM. And I feel like if we do that, then we're consistent and correct with everything across every different potential place where a blob base fee exists.
Is there any downside of doing that? Aside from some teams will have to change their code and like we'll have to write some tests with.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would like to know from Anders or anyone else who's more familiar with 7918.
Mariel, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I really cannot read the sentiment of what one option against the other, but from the testing and execution spec side, I think it's much easier if we don't need to have to access the parent fork block parameters, because we don't have a mechanism to do that in execution specs. It's not impossible, but I think that highlights the complexity, right? So I would heavily lean towards only using the current block forks parameters. So BPO1, and it's enabled at fork n, and we use those parameters only, nothing to do with Fusaka parameters, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks, Milos.
Yeah, I wrote on a Discord. I just want to mention it here if people didn't see it. The similar problem will arise with the 6-second slot. I started prototyping that, and you also have like several parameters are going to change there, and the gas limit will have to be basically halved at the fork boundary. And the way that it makes sense now, I'm not saying maybe implementation-wise is the easiest way to do it, but the way that it makes sense to do it is to do all the calculation of the base fee and the gas limit and everything do based on the parent values. And then if you have to do some post modification, like for example, in the case of 6-loss penalty, to divide the gas limit by 2, you would do that after all the calculation is done for the parent. Otherwise, you can get into some a bit tricky and inconsistent behaviors. But I can understand that, for example, implementing one way or the other might make things easier, either on the spec or on the clients, and it's probably not going to like disrupt anything if one block is not calculated based on the, let's say, logical formula or anything like that. But I just want to highlight that for the 6 seconds block, we will have the same issue, and there the parameters matter maybe a bit more of how you do the things, but we can do it one way or the other there as well. So I just want to highlight that that's another thing.
Got it. Thank you. There's the side conversation in the chat that basically says we also can't use the current block excess blob gas. So I guess is this something we should align on right now, or do we want to discuss this further async and make a final decision on Monday's testing call?
I think we should definitely decide it now.
Okay.
Just because like this issue is pretty silly. I mean, we all agree the impact is like it doesn't matter. So this is just splitting hairs at a like very high level here.
Yeah.
So we just take it to a vote or like whatever, but we have to get
So I
rid
guess
of it.
yeah. What yeah. Can we use the current parameters? I guess my understanding is
Yeah. Sorry, this is the reason why the fork happened, because half of the clients are using like current update.
Okay.
And
okay. So anyone opposed to using the current parameters, the current blocks parameters on the fork block rather than the parent?
well, I'm opposed, but I mean, if I'm overruled, that's fine.
Okay, then yes, I think we should move forward for that. Just to, oh, sorry, Felix, you're gonna say something?
Sorry. Yeah, I just really wanted to say that like this decision is great, but we should also figure out a way to specify this. Like, how are we gonna explain this in the EIP or in the specs or whatever? And I think this is something we can do async.
Yeah, I was gonna ask who wants to own that. It would be good to have someone who can put a PR up on the EIP and ideally the specs or test today or tomorrow. Yeah, Roman and then Ben.
Yeah, I think that the fork happened exactly because like people treat the spec differently. Because in my mind, it's already clear that uh, the calculation function is defined within the fork. It uses the fork constant, and it does not resolve the parameters based on the header timestamp. It just takes header as an input. So,
But the header is the parent header.
yeah, the parent header, but the function is defined by the hard fork, and the function uses the constant as
I think it's not that clear. I think we need to make it clearer in the EIP.
So I guess who wants to own updating the EIP and ideally the test cases?
I want to speak on behalf of execution specs. I think, I mean, as far as I can see now, there's nothing to update in the execution specs because basically what Roman exactly said. So the fork is you already decided which logic to use. If you look at the header timestamp, you then decide, okay, I'm gonna go into this fork in the execution specs, and that's what I'm gonna use. And inside of that, you will find every constant that you need. You will find everything that you need. So I don't think it's unclear on the specs. Maybe it is unclear in the EIP. For the specs, of course, we can take care of that. But
then
for the
I
EIP,
guess-
I'm not sure how to make it better, to be honest.
Okay, Anders saying he can fix the EIPs today. One thing that I guess we should probably also have is, can we have like a static test somewhere for this so that yeah, we test the spec behavior explicitly?
We'll make a release. If not a full release, we'll try to make sure that we have the static specs, static tests out by today or tomorrow. Yep.
Thanks. Ben?
Should this be like an assumed precedent? And if it needs to like reach into the parent header, then that's like the exception. We get prior fork parameters. Because I've heard that this has been a question on a number of EIPs before, whether to use like the prior fork or the parent fork.
Yeah, it might be worth asking that in the chat and seeing if anyone disagrees.
Sorry, what was the proposal?
Should this behavior using the current block to calculate things at port boundaries be basically our default for all EIPs?
Probably.
It's not possible to answer this, yeah? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, we cannot answer this in a general way.
Okay. So yeah. Ansgar has a comment saying that we should. Oh, sorry. Ansgar has a comment saying that we should just have the precedent be we explicitly specify it in the EIP every time. Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
I just want to quickly say that, and then I'll be done. So the problem with this whole thing is just that I think this is more an issue of like people just having a different model of these EIP constants and parameters. And it is always going to be the question, like now that we have all these EIPs, which are, which basically try to update the values of certain parameters, we're going to be running into this more often because within the clients it's not always, we don't all handle it the same way. Basically how the values of these constants are resolved or how this whole system even works, and it totally doesn't match the spec. And in the past, these things kind of just didn't happen because we always just introduced new features with new parameters, but we never really modified the parameters. So now that we're kind of doing that, I think this is why we're seeing this. And we do have to figure out a way, I think, in general, in the specs is pretty clear because the executable spec is just code. So obviously you can run it and that defines the behavior. So either this will be the point now where we just say, you know what, guys, instead of always looking at the EIP and trying to guess it from the text, we can just look at the spec. I mean, to be honest, we should have done it in this case. Like the spec is clear now, but also within the EIP is maybe pretty important to figure out some way of just making it very clear for all of us how these parameters work and like what is the value, like which value of the parameter is assumed in every context. Like at the moment, it's just basically like when you're processing block X, then you're using the parameters which are defined by the fork which is active at block X. But this is, I don't think this was so clear before, honestly.
Yeah, and I guess this was also my point that I raised in the Discord around like, where and how we should test this. Like we found this on the devnet, but yes, it feels like these are the types of things where we should have like a static reference that we're, high confidence that clients all have the same behavior. So
I mean, we would have gotten to the stat test sooner or later. I think it's just more the question of like it just wasn't really done yet, but it would have been done soon. Like this is not like we wouldn't. It was just a matter of like basically the testing team not getting to this area like yet.
Andrew?
I wanted to comment on Roman's point. So to me, it was clear, like when I was reading this spec, it was clear. The other interpretation was clear in my head because my assumption was that the spec used pure mathematical functions, and like in Roman's interpretation, it uses global variables. And we all know that global variables is actually, they are error prone. So my suggestion would be to actually to strive to have pure mathematical functions in the specs. So like now it turns out this get base fee per blob guess function, it actually doesn't take one parameter, it takes two parameters. And we should make it clear so that it's like mathematically it now becomes a function of two variables rather than a single variable. And yeah, I think if we use pure mathematical functions, then there will be less room for confusion.
Okay, I think, yeah, we can probably continue this conversation, I think, but at the very least, we should try and define these things more explicitly. And yeah, perhaps like have a standard with how we treat like the different functions of the spec, but I know we have other things to cover. So anything else on this specific issue? Oh yeah, Mario.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like take too much time here to discuss like our current approaches, but I just want to highlight that most of the time the reason why we struggle to keep up with testing something is because it's normal that a change or an EIP comes out of nowhere, and it's just like suggested for CFI in all core devs without prior notice to us. I think we should change that. I think we should like encourage EIP writers to reach out to us, and we should together come up with a document or something that explicitly details all of the testing complexities that we are going to find when we are testing this EIP. It's already happening in Amsterdam, which is good. The block level access list guys already reached out to us, and we're working together on that. But I think it should happen for every single EIP, even the ones that look like super simple, because that's always the case. It's like a super simple EIP comes to ACDE and it gets CFI'd without us even taking a look yet on testing side. So my point is that we have to encourage EIP writers to come to us, and we have to sit down and have a discussion about the complexity of the EIP, and we cannot come to ACDE without having that discussion prior, even if the EIP is super simple.
I think that sounds reasonable, and maybe this is something we can apply for Glamsterdam. So we have already like these. I think there's been 11 proposed EIPs beyond the headliners. So it's probably worth it to have actually these 11 EIPs chat with the testing team. As we're going into Amsterdam planning. And then ideally, EIP champions and client teams can also eventually just write their own tests. But I think if we have this set of EIPs already, we can we can make sure that we're looking at them from the testing perspective. Okay. Anything else on the DevNet 4 issue? Barnabas, you had this other point about the BPO fraction update. Do you
Right.
wanna...
So we had this proposal from Anders saying that we should probably use max and target 3-2 properties and use a static function to calculate the fraction values. We have posted it somewhere, but it would be just good whether we want to enforce this, like in future devnets and also on public testnets, or whether we want to basically set target and max at random values.
Ansgar?
Yeah, so the kind of sticking to the formula for the update fraction, I mean that makes sense, at least for a ratio of basically 3-2. If we ever were to want to go to a different ratio, then we would have to kind of make a more new pragmatic assessment. I don't think there's any specific reason to always stick to 3-2. I think in general it should be pretty much the upper limit, though. So we've already heard that sometimes there are issues where builders temporarily kind of have some issues with blob inclusion and temporarily stop including blobs, and then we just can't hit the target. Like then we're just staying under the average of 6 right now, and then the base feed drops down and everything, so it causes issues. So I think we should be very hesitant to ship something where we are above the that ratio. But if there's ever like specific reason in the future to basically go to like a ratio that's closer to 50-50, to like basically 2-to-1 again, I don't see why we should pre-commit to not doing that.
Anyone else have thoughts on this?
So it sounds like we want to generally have this as like a, design, well, not design goal, but something we aim for, but still retain the flexibility in case we need to change it later. So I believe that's what Barnish was asking for, is just if we could agree to this, like, this structure, these relative ratios and everything.
Yeah, so the ratio, so this update fraction formula would expect that we have 3-to-2 fractions.
Yeah, but what do you want to do with that formula?
So we're going to be using this for like we're going to be enforcing this on all future devnets basically, and we're going to be calculate them on the fly. So like we're not going to be using like random BPO values anymore. Question is if we want to enforce it going forward or not.
To Ansgar and Boris?
Yes, I think we can't enforce it in protocol unless we like that. Then would have to come with a pre-commitment to also always sticking with the 2-to-3 ratio, because that update ratio only makes sense in that context of the 2-to-3 ratio. So if we ever were to ship something that has a meaningful different ratio, so I don't know if we ever ship 2040 or something for some reason, because we get feedback from the L2s that they prefer that or whatever, then we would specifically want to no longer use that formula. So I don't think we can enshrine that derivation. I do think we should always just use it whenever setting the BPO parameters, but it should not be in protocol logic.
Boris?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing as Ansgar, but perhaps I can actually guess why Barnabas is trying to ask for this. And I assume that some tooling in testing, I don't know, perhaps Spamware or like blob spam uses a particular formula so that to update how many blobs they're sending or something like this. And I would encourage not to use this formula enshrined and just keep the flexibility. And we agree that we're generally going to use this ratio, but we're not going to enforce it in protocol, and we're not going to make it part of consensus.
Yeah, I think we agree on that point. So I don't know. I'll just say what I say in chat. Like, I think it's fine to have this pattern. Like, if we want to, if Barnabas is working on a devnet and, wants to use this pattern to project out for like a PPO schedule, I think that's fine. But we should also all understand that it could change in the future. Like, it's not enough of a rule that it, for example, could be enshrined in consensus.
Okay, so I think no agreement to like enshrine this in consensus now, and we can discuss async. Yeah, to what extent we want to enshrine it in testing, at least for this fork, and how hard it would be to change in the future.
It shouldn't really be something where we're locked in.
Yeah.
In terms of like, future compatibility. The only thing here is if we quote enshrine it in testing, it means we're not looking at other values, and there could be bugs there, just given present issues.
Yeah.
But that's not a reason not to do this. I'm just calling that out.
Yeah. We can. Yeah, I think we can discuss this more.
I mean, I wouldn't pick values that have never been tested. So like, ideally, we want to be testing the values that we're going to be using in mainnet. So picking values that we realistically want to use in mainnet, and if we say we're going to be using this 2-to-3 fraction for like the next few BPOs at least, for sure, then I would say that we're going to be using this base3 update fraction as well, just till we want to use some other instruction.
Okay, well, I guess, yeah, we agreed we're not gonna try this in protocol. I think we can discuss like how to best support this in testing, either async or on ACDT. But yeah, want to be mindful of time here. I guess anything else on the devnet 4 BPO activations? If not, next up, Alex had proposals for dates following from last week's ACDC. So I know there were some concerns raised about the dates on Awkward Devs then, and since then, Alex has followed up with the CL teams, which were mostly the ones that raised his concerns, proposing that we have the client releases for the first testnet for the first testnet on the first two testnets, sorry, on September 8th. So we would have Sepolia and Haleshki releases then, and then fork Haleshki on September 15, then fork Sepolia on September 29th, and then on after we see the Sepolia fork being successful, put out releases for Hoodie, which hopefully would be the same as for mainnet. So assuming that Hoodie is just a clean, like a clean fork. And so in the chat, Pawan said Lighthouse has concerns with this, given we haven't figured out the sync issues yet. Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments? Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, maybe I'll just walk through these dates for a little more context. So yeah, I've talked to a number of people since last week just to follow up on this and try to, dial something in so we can still target pre-dev connect for Fusaka. One thing that came up, and it would probably be like the first event, so it's worth calling out, is with Haleshki. There doesn't seem to be an issue with having sort of non-canonical or like it's not having formal releases. We did this before with Haleshki, where operators are into like various branches and they have some way to do this. So that gives people a little more time to make formal releases, which I think will be nice. We'd start the bug bounty. So yeah, ideally there's a Sepolia release on the 8th so that we can fork Sepolia on the 29th. That pushed the fork there back 1 week from what we had last week in the schedule, or at least the proposal. And the bug bounty would also begin then. And otherwise, yeah, it kind of proceeds like we had it. So yeah, I generally just curious how people feel about this. Again, as we see, things are kind of day by day on the status. But yeah, so yeah, I hear point here on the Lighthouse thing, makes sense. And otherwise, yeah, be curious what other clients feel about this, especially on the EL side, because we're here. And if any CL teams can chime in as well, that'd be great, just so we can get a view of what's going on.
Thanks. Matt?
I just wanted to say I feel a little worried that we're discussing timelines when we are running into issues that we don't even have static tests for. And these are like pretty basic stuff, like verifying all of the clients are doing the right computation for one of the EIPs at the fork boundary. And we're getting close to having that stuff, but it just feels like we're rushing this a little bit. And that's just, on the EL side, like obviously the CLs are having their own issues that it's causing the devnet to not really work. So it doesn't really feel appropriate to talk about the timelines right now.
And so you'd rather basically we spend the next week or two focus on getting these tests up, ensuring the devnets are like running smoothly, and then set a date. I know this came up also in the context of the CL side, like, should we wait to have like kind of a clean devnet and then set a date?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, it's kind of how we've done it, right? Like, once we see a good devnet and we're happy with it, then we start setting the dates. And like, we can talk about ideal worlds and try to think about when these things are going to be happening and like make targets. That's fine, but we keep making targets and we keep, we're on DevNet 4 and we said DevNet 2 might be the last DevNet, right? Like, at some point we just have to be realistic and like, let's just do it right rather than continually try to push this fork out as fast as we can.
Thanks. Ben?
On the last call, I'm not sure if it was testing or consensus, there was a concern that not everything had been merged, and a potential delay from that. Would that mean we need another devnet?
Right. So the concern was that a lot of the CL code was running off like a non-master branch, I believe.
Yeah, so they were in like a feature fork rather than the mainline code.
Yeah, my understanding is that people have kind of put in quite a bit of a lift to resolve that. So yeah, DevNet 5 I think would be useful, and the question is like, how much can we interleave that with the schedule that we have?
Yeah, and I guess the DevNet 5, are we saying we would just want to apply the fixes to the BPO schedule that we discussed? And obviously the fixes on the CL side in terms of syncing, but there would be no other changes.
Yep. So basically, we want to make sure. I think we're going to be running another big devnet, and we're going to need to make sure that all the BPO changes are working as expected and without any extra noise. We made this. We wanted to make the measurements for BPO numbers in this devnet, but it's just so noisy that I think we're not going to have enough useful information, unfortunately.
Got it. Adrian? Oh, we can't hear you, Adrian. Oh. Okay, so in terms of moving forward with a DevNet 5, I assume we'd want it at the earliest next week. The blockers would be effectively the Lighthouse issue, the Nimbus issue, and then making sure that all the clients pass some static tests on the EL side in terms of calculating these blob parameter values. Anything else that we would want to see before launching DevNet 5?
Yeah, so for DevNet 5, I would suggest to increase a share of minority clients. So like Grandini and Lighthouse is maybe 1% or 2%, and if we could increase to, let's say, 4 or 5% of share, I think it would not make any harm, and at the same time would help a bit for us to test more things. So that's for DevNet 5.
What specifically would you test more in that scenario?
I mean, it's at least from from my experience. So we get like a way less block proposals, and we have a way less combinations with other ELs and so on. So it's a bit tricky to get fast a good response of what is wrong with our clients. It's a bit hard to explain that.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. I think that makes sense. It's like, yeah, you get less. I think there's a tension here between we do want the devnets to somewhat mimic mainnet. I would defer to PanOps in terms of like what's the right ratio here. Like if Grandine is 1% on mainnet, like what's the max we should put on a devnet? Yeah. I don't know. Barnabas, if you have opinions now, otherwise we can discuss this on the testing call.
We use the clientdiversity.org numbers in order to determine how many validators each CL and EL should have. These are approximations, but these are the best we have. We can.
And would there be
yeah?
Would there be downsides to like for the smaller clients, like Lodestar, Grandine, even Aragon and Ref that have like somewhere between 1% to 3%, like doubling or tripling that so that there's like 3% of Grandine nodes or like 5% of Ref or something like that, so we get more data. Or
yeah, I mean we can increase it for sure. We're gonna need to then reduce the share of Lighthouse and Prism, for example, and the same way as for Ref and Aragon, we can increase those as well and remove some gas and other nodes. Yeah, and then, for example, for DevNet 4, it would have been actually beneficial to have a bit less share of Lighthouse, because right now we see a non-finality mainly because Lighthouse.
I do think we should probably keep those thresholds though, because if on mainnet it's true, that like Lighthouse and Prism represent more than 2/3, we should make sure that the devnets mimic that. But then within these like bounds of how much we need to finalize, like I think we can have some flexibility. Yeah. Okay. So I guess we can move forward with DevNet 5. Again, have these CL syncing fixes, have the ELs changes based on the new specs. And we can discuss on Monday how the bug fixing is going on the CL side to see when's a realistic time to launch this. If things go well, then potentially we can launch DevNet 5 before ACDE next week. And test all the fixes, see how we're feeling about about the fork, and discuss states then if appropriate. Okay, anything else on Fusaka? Okay, moving to Glamsterdam now. So we've been discussing the headliner selection for the past few weeks. And on the CL side, we've landed on EPBS, and then we had previously said we would like conditionally do block access lists if we did EPBS on the CL side. So I want to do one last check there. And I think also highlight like one other thing that's come up in the past couple of weeks of discussing headliners is with the discussion around fossil or around repricings. I think there's been like some, I don't know, potentially like lack of clarity between should the headliner be like the biggest thing in the fork, or should it be the most important one? I think on the CL side, those two things are quite aligned. Like everyone seems to agree that EPBS, or because there's strong consensus that EPBS should be the most important thing in the fork, and it's obviously the biggest one. But on the EL side, I know we've had like these discussions around like, okay, is fossil the most important? Is block access list, or is potentially something like repricings? Not to say that we shouldn't do either of those, but wanted to at least raise it. Any concerns, thoughts? Otherwise, I think we just move forward with block access lists and EPBS. Okay, we have some block access list support in the chat. So we'll merge the PR that Alex had opened. So this means we've set both EPBS and block access list as the two headliners for Glamsterdam. I think one thing that would be helpful to discuss now is how do we actually want to think about the scope for Glamsterdam and timelines. I think obviously we can't set dates from the very beginning, but it is helpful when we're thinking about what else to consider, how many other EIPs, whether to do another like big thing like fossil or to add a bunch of repricing EIPs, like what's the rough target we'd want to aim for, and how do we like roughly go towards that. My proposal would be that we should be fairly strict in terms of just getting EPBS and block access lists implemented and fairly far along before we consider other things. But yes, curious how other people feel about that and how they think we should approach the process. And yeah, to Fotis' point, setting a timeline target would make scoping easier. And yeah, Ansgar has this rough timeline around like, okay, should we try to aim for June for releases? So imagine we did want to aim for June, which is kind of in line with what people have been saying around 6 months forks. How does that affect our scope? I guess, yeah, maybe it's a good point to start. Does anyone think we should not try to at least roughly target June for a hard fork? And if we're forking mainnet in June, it means that we should have releases ready for like test nets and whatnot in April to give us the time to fork these test nets and move forward. Yeah. Yeah, Ben?
I think trying to maintain a 6-month cadence is good, because then it does relieve that pressure of people trying to get everything crammed into a fork. Because you only have to wait 6 months. It's not like a year plus. So hopefully the small forks can be smaller, although that didn't really happen before.
There's a question about like, can we get some commitment to fossil if it doesn't delay the fork by more than n months? I think realistically, the only way to do this would be that we say block access list and EPBS are the two first things, and we don't include anything else until those are pretty ready, and then we include fossil, and we don't include anything else. I think it's very hard if we commit to doing like fossil or anything else significant now, the code kind of gets intertwined. So like, yeah, I would strongly prefer like we make a call once we're farther along on the implementation of the two headliners. This means, if we want to CFI fossil, we can CFI fossil, but we then need to decide like, okay, is there anything else that we're doing before fossil in this fork? And ideally have like both block access list and EPBS running on devnets before we make the call of adding something. Yeah. Thomas?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I agree, but just still, it's a bit of a hard thing to wrap my head around, because having this sort of like conditional inclusion up until maybe after we have like some more certainty on like EPBS and BALs makes it quite hard to deal with how we proceed in the meantime with fossil. And I do want to insist that it was like basically the most supported EIP by the community. It was like 14 out of like 21, I guess, like suggestions. And yeah, so I'm just saying, like, and it was also proposed as a headliner, and the community actually voted on it being proposed as a headliner. So now basically saying, yes, we sort of like CFI it and put it as a vanilla EIP and conditional inclusion it before we, it's just like a bit of a weird in between that is sort
So
of
I
hard
guess,
to deal with.
yeah, so I guess, like, yeah, clearly we want to do block access lists and EPBS. That's a priority. So we should schedule those for inclusion and start working on DevNet with them. I think it would be reasonable to move fossil to CFI if people agree. And then, like any other CFI, the EIP, like when it gets, oh, fossil is already CFI. So like, yeah, in that case, when we're ready to actually start implementing it, we'll have to make a call between whether or not we want to move that one from CFI to SFI or anything else. I don't think we can actually make this call today. Like, there is some uncertainty. Yeah. So but I think, like, yes, if it's actually true that people want to keep fossil as the highest priority and put it in the fork, then I think the way we reflect that preference is by implementing the two headliners and then making the call to implement fossil next if we think we have the capacity for it. Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, this was brought up in the last call that there was a concern that the CL side and the EL side might not take the same amount of time to basically finish developing the EIPs slated for the fork, and that it might be possible that the EL is ready sooner. And if that were the case, then possibly decoupling these forks. And I would say that leaving fossil in CFI status basically enables us to continue with that strategy. Like, if it looks to be that the CL will take longer anyway, then it would make sense to leave fossil out of that fork, but then do it in the next fork, which will come at the same time as EPBS, and vice versa. Like, if they're going to be the same time, then you can put it in. But yeah.
Yeah, it's true that, like, yeah, we can still split the forks. I think that quickly becomes less true as we move farther with the testing, but it's definitely easier to split things if there's no cross layer feature. Yeah. POTUS?
Yeah, so once we specified something and we more or less have some clarity on the fork, I think this enables clients to allocate resources better. We are now in a better shape to start working. My proposal would be to try to arrange, not here, but probably ACDE or even like informally with Panda Ops on a zero devnet that on the CL side that will have EPBS, the minimal implementation without builders, self-building, but the separation, which is the hard part. I believe we can do this in 1 to 2 months, all clients. Once we have this, it's very easy to try to add fossil on top of this and get an idea of how long it will take. But without having a full implementation of all clients, it's going to be very hard to even gauge how long it would take to add fossil on top.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the DevNet should be also including block access lists. And then, yes, once we have this Glamsterdam DevNet 1, we can determine what we want to add on top of it. Terence?
Yeah, I think just plus one on this comment. I would say like fossil on top of EPBS will look much different than fossil on top of like Fulu, for example. So like currently our estimate on how much fossil work really is basically maybe completely off because we're not looking at fossil on top of EPBS. So definitely makes sense to get EPBS in some fundamental stage and then add fossil on top.
Okay, so I think that'll make sense. So we move forward with EPBS and block access lists being SFI'd, get devnets with those, and then make decisions about SFIing other things. We leave fossil as CFI'd for now. We also had this 6-second slot headliner as CFI'd, but I think if we're accepting EPBS, then it means we, like by default, are not accepting this EIP 7782. So I would remove that one. And then the other thing I wanted to discuss is when should our deadline be for proposals for just regular non-headliner EIPs? We've had a few already. I think there's 10 or 11. My suggestion would be the Fusaka mainnet releases, not necessarily the fork, but I think whenever we have the Fusaka mainnet releases should be when we stop accepting new proposals and we can start actually reviewing what's there. So that seems reasonable.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah, we confirmed the headliners. We're gonna remove the 6-second slot proposal. Keep fossil as the only CFI'd proposal for now. And then if anyone wants to propose other EIPs for the fork, you can open a PR to the meta EIP, and we'll have the deadline for that be the mainnet releases for Fusaka, and not have to review them by then. Okay, on Glamsterdam headliners, I know Tony had a couple of things about block accesses that he wanted to discuss, so that probably makes sense to go moving forward with that.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen very quickly. Right. Yeah, I basically wanted to quickly discuss 3 open points that we still have with block level access lists. And now that we SFI'd the EIP, it makes sense to discuss those because more people had an opportunity to look into it. Essentially, the 3 points are: first, should we include the state locations into the block level access lists or not? So state location is basically everything that comes with an S load or a balance opcode, calls, static calls, and so on. It's basically everything that isn't modified, so everything that is not in the state diff. The second point is RLP versus SSC, and the last thing is how to handle system contracts, because Jared brought it up in the Discord, and yeah, makes sense to discuss it. So first, would love to hear people's input, especially clients' input about state locations. The thing is, originally it was planned that it can be used for parallel batch IO. So before even starting executing, you would do all the disk reads upfront in parallel. And the question is, would clients actually use it? Or would going parallelizing transactions and in this way also doing somehow parallel disk reads, would that be already enough? Another point is more info. Of course, if we keep all the state locations, this means we include more info. And then it's the question, is that info actually useful? And it might be useful. So I've talked with people working in auditing, and they said it might be useful to know exactly in which transactions, which contracts were touched. The con on the right-hand side is, of course, the size. It adds like 50 kilobytes. This is like 22 kilobytes on average today at 40 million gas limit. This is like at the target, so it will double if we are really at the limit. So of course, this is like the problem. It adds quite significant size, and I would be curious what EL clients think about. Should we include them or should we drop them?
I feel like without having a performant implementation that shows that there's tangible benefits from including them, it's hard to argue for them. I don't quite understand the auditing perspective, but I mean, I'm not an auditor. I'm a core dev, so maybe that has merit. But yeah, so like I've said before, the more we parallelize the transaction throughput, the less this including these gives us. So yeah.
I think also having this state location will not only help to have parallel batch IO, but it will also help to do real parallelization. So execute all of the transactions in the same time and after merge the modification. So it will help to have more improvement in the future. So I think it will be nice to have it. Yeah.
Police?
Something that I haven't seen discussed, and I think Anders is the only one that is pushing this forward, is to have a more formal approach. If we are going with the PBS, then the cost of broadcasting and of executing the block changes. We have resources in a different way than what we have now. So I think all of these considerations of bandwidth versus execution should be taken into account on what is the time that we're going to have to both of them and what's going to be useful and how we want to optimize those. So it's not a discussion that should be had with like today's parameters, but with tomorrow's parameters when we're going to include this.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we don't really know how much clients get without actually having client implementations on that. At least from the specs, it's not much work to add them or to remove them. But I guess in client implementations, this might be different. Maybe Jared, could you elaborate more on how much work is it if we don't decide on, we don't take a decision today, and for now we keep them inside, and then we figure out along the path to remove them.
Adding them to the BAL is trivial. I think it's trivial to keep them in as far as the complexity goes.
Okay, yeah. Then I would say let's just keep them in and move on with the second item, which is SSZ versus RLP. So there were people pushed for SSZ because it allows for more compact proofs and the block level access list, including the post balance of every account that was included in the block. There were some use cases brought up where SSZ might be useful. The thing is, oh, someone is drawing, or was it me? The thing is, RLP is smaller. I mean, this is like almost negligible, but it's smaller, and of course it's known and tested. So I would be curious if there is appetite on the EL side to start into getting SSZ, or if we kind of want to further postpone that. I personally don't have a strong opinion, and right now it's in SSZ. I think it's quite nice because of the compact proofs.
I think Justin, Guillaume, and Roman have opinions on this.
Yeah, real quick, I appreciate our interest in getting SSZ onto the EL. I'm very much for it as well. This pops up a lot, and we, always avoid it. We always kick the can down the road. I think there's good reason for that. I think technically, I think there's a good reason, as stated on the slide, to adopt SSZ. I want to make sure that everybody is aware and mindful that we will be adopting a sort of hybrid serialization mechanic on the L1, and it will likely stick around for a while, short of us having a headliner release that focuses entirely on a full conversion from RLP to SSZ. I think continuing the process of migrating from RLP to SSZ will be a gradual one. And so that means that maybe a ride-along EIP every hard fork. So, I think it's realistic to say that if we do this in an incremental fashion, you're looking about, 2-3 years before it's like fully adopted. So I want to raise that as a concern from a project management perspective, more so than a technical one. So thanks.
Yeah, Guillaume?
Yeah, two questions. Okay, actually one remark, one question. The problem with SSD is that in Go, there's not really a good library. There are some that do the work, do the job, sorry, but there's none that really makes us happy. So that's the first thing to consider. The second issue, or at least the second question I have, is if we pick RLP, one of the advantages of SSE over RLP is the extensibility. I think it's easier to extend an SSE container than an RLP container, especially if we get Ethan's favorite topic, the I can't remember the name now, but the extensible objects. Sorry, I forgot the name. If we go for RLP, and there's like 5 flavors of BALs, do we have the flexibility to add more fields later? Like if we decide, okay, we start with BALs with only the locations, and then we want to add the post values later. Is it going to be a headache to add those to change the format basically?
No, shouldn't be a problem. I mean, we always have like the versioning through the fork. So basically, by having the slot number or the timestamp, you have a versioning.
Yeah, I'm really talking about just in terms of fields in the structure. If you add a new field, this is going to be a nightmare to handle. So it's not a spec level question. It's more like a coding question. So I guess that would be more like for Jared.
There could be a problem if you if your Merkle tree for Merkleization expands by one tree level, by one depth, then the proof would also change. We had that problem on the CL with the stable containers try to solve. I guess introducing stable containers here would be not worth it. But yeah, so it's not super trivial to just add a new field. Yeah, it feels like right now people are more leaning towards.
I have a. Oh.
Yeah, go on. No, go on, please.
I have a question about the Go SSE. I think it's a structural point about this. So, specifically the Go SSE library thing. Putting aside some of the snarkier comments or whatever, and the discussion, or including them either way in the chat. But the idea of this concern, objection, I don't know, has been raised from the beginning, and there's a sort of a circularity to it. It's that there's a reticence that has been expressed by at least 2 or 3 different people on EL's side to say, to add any SSE feature, whether it's the first of an anticipated sort of 2 to 3 year transition, or one kind of big bang EIP, or the whole, yes, as people are referring to, alluding to Ethan's, so the stable containers, more broadly, the pure ETH is kind of the current push there, which includes stable containers essentially. But the idea of the Go SSE libraries, this was to a year ago, this was to 2 years ago. Is there an ambition? Is this essentially a way of just deciding not to do it by refusing to implement a quote unquote good Go SSE library, or refusing to define a library as good? I mean, I'm a little bit snarky here, but I'm also semi-serious, because it seems like at some level sort of insubstantial objection.
I guess I'm not a Go expert, but my perspective on SSD from someone who has 0 skin in the game, I don't maintain the client, is it sounds like the type of thing we always say we want to do, but then the revealed preference is we don't actually prioritize it because there's higher impact things that we agreed to do in the protocol. My personal preference at this point is like we should consider it only as a standalone thing. Like, if we if we add one more RLP object today, then it's one more RLP object to migrate in the future, in addition to all the ones we already have. There's not much incremental damage in a way. And my sense is like, unless there's like an explicit stated preference from the EL to say now we're moving to SSD, we should just assume that EL is using RLP. Maybe the best proposal I've seen on the SSD on the EL side was, I think, from Peter from Guest a few years ago, where his view was like, we should probably start by moving the peer-to-peer layer of the EL to SSD, because this is something clients can do at their own rhythm. We don't need to coordinate on it, and then it would force all the clients to use the library. And then, once all these clients have integrated the library, maybe a year or two after, we can drop the RLP onto the peer-to-peer layer and assume that we're transitioning the consensus part of the clients, or consensus critical part of the clients. But it does feel like, it keeps coming up as like this side topic every time, and it somewhat gets shut down or has lukewarm enthusiasm. So I feel like it's probably better if we just assume that EL is an RLP, but here's what others think, Guillaume and Tony.
I just wanted to address what Justin has been saying. It's not like we haven't tried to make SSD work. Peter spent a good chunk of last year trying to get it to work. We do have libraries, they're just not good. They come up with a lot of issues that we have to go around. They all have their trouble, and it's not like we're not trying to block it on grounds that we feel it's going to be difficult. We have tried, we know that, and so when we say it's me, but when I say I don't want SSD because I think it's going to be a lot of trouble for what it brings, it's what it is. It's like, we know it's a fact. So I think RLP works. And sure, when it comes to, if we ever move to SSD later, we'll have to do a conversion, but then that assumes we will have a good library by then, and the transition will be a breeze. It's just one more object to transition. The thing is, we don't know how to handle that efficiently.
Thanks for the input. Feels like I got the feeling that EL have some more leaning towards RLP, so I will update the EIP to have RLP as the default for now, and it should be, as soon as the library exists, it should be an easy change in the end. So we can theoretically still switch to RLP, but to SSC, but let's keep it for RLP for now. And the last thing that will be a very quick thing, it's basically, there was a discussion around how to handle system calls. Basically, we have two system contracts that cause state changes pre-execution, so pre-transaction execution, and three system contracts that cause state changes post-execution. Basically, we have those ring buffers where we write the parent hash and the beacon block root into, and then withdrawals cause a balance diff, and the EL triggered withdrawals plus maxi-b, they both have a queue that is then dequeued at the end, and you need to update those for first slots. Please correct me if I'm wrong, and look at the EIP if you were involved in those EIPs, but I think I got the edge cases right there. And then the proposal would be to encode those state changes into the block level access lists by doing everything that occurs pre-execution is mapped to transaction index length of transactions, which is like pretending it's the last transaction, and everything that is state system contract related that occurs post-execution will just be incremented by once. The cool thing is this maintains that the block level access list transaction indices are the same as the block transaction indices, and this was kind of important to me. I think, I'm not sure, Jared, if we find consensus on that point already, and if others have an opinion.
Yeah, so I guess my original point of contention here, I know we've now agreed to separate the pre and post execution system contract changes, and that's I think that's really what is important for simplifying the client implementation. So my preference, which I've stated before on the Discord, is that the index in the access list should like if you take the index of all state changes in the access list, it should reflect the order in which they would be sequentially applied to execute the block. So essentially, like what I would prefer is that the index 0 be the pre-execution, and then proceeding, and then after that in the transactions, and then the last index would be any post state changes. And so I think that your pushback against this has been that this does not. So this would mean that the index of the BAL state changes does not, for transactions, doesn't reflect their index within the block. And I would say that from the implementation perspective, this is a pretty trivial issue. It's not. I mean, if you're implementing it for the first time, it is bug prone, but like basic test coverage can catch this.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem for client devs. It's more like, imagine you're a user that uses an RPC, you query a block, and then you look at the block level access list, and suddenly transaction index 1 in the block level access list is actually transaction 0 in the block, right? This is like confusing.
But you can imagine that people will build tooling that accounts for this, right? I think, I mean, having just like looked at the JSON encoding of some of these blocks access lists, they're not exactly like amenable to being able to. Some of the bigger ones aren't really. I mean, it's hard to manually parse through these, right? Like, I don't think that users. Yeah, I think there will be tooling developed around this, and that it won't be an issue.
I wanted to say that I agree with Jared. We implemented something similar in Aragon we also have virtual pre-execution and post-execution transactions, and it's logical like to arrange them orderly. So 0 corresponds to the beginning of the block, and the last one corresponds to the end of the block. Otherwise, I think if they are not ordered, it will be very confusing for developers. I think like having them ordered will be less confusing to the user, because if even like otherwise they see, oh, okay, there are 2 extra transactions at the end. What does it mean? So it's better to just do it in the sorted order.
I think it's a little bit of a semantical question as well. So my suggestion, since both transactions and pre and post block executions, there are just state transitions, let's just call this index the state transition index in the API itself, and then go with what Jared said, where like all of the items are in their chronological order in the block level access list.
I would suggest keeping it different from the transactions list, and perhaps arranging it in a separate section, because they are not actual transactions. I think that's the most confusing thing, to mingle it with the transactions, because they're not going to go through EVM in some cases and are applied sort of in a different fashion. So if there were to be benefits of parallelization on those, I firstly doubt there would be, but if there were, I think they're going to be processed differently. So it doesn't harm to just have a system contract section in the list and like put your transactions order over there, and it would be up to client teams to figure out what to do with those. If they want to warm it up before, they're free to do it, or if they want to go in how it is right now, which is just let the transactions happen and then apply the system contracts afterwards and check if everything is okay. If they want to do that parallelly, which is kind of risky, they can do it. If they want to do it sequentially, they can do it, but maybe just keep it separate.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, this is super helpful. So just to summarize it, it feels like we definitely want to keep pre and post different, so that we in the future allow for system contracts to have, for example, balance changes pre and post execution. And then we don't like the way I proposed it with having 2 additional transactions, but instead we only have 1 additional transaction for the post state, and instead shift every transaction index by 1 and have the pre-execution changes as transaction index 0. I will update the EIP on that, and we can still further discuss it in the Discord.
I think if we do that, we should probably move away from calling them transaction indices. But
right, yeah, I can call it block level access list index or something.
Yeah, sure.
We can bike chat the name, I think. But yeah. Oh, Maris is saying, yeah, there should be a block access list breakout. Do we maybe want to do a first pass of modifications on the EIP and then discuss those in a breakout once Tony has them?
I'm happy with
people,
that, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, people have a bit of time to review async. So yeah, just let us know when you have the changes to the EIP, and then yeah, we'll schedule a breakout. Yeah, okay, so we only have 2 minutes left. We had a couple more things on the agenda, but I don't think we'll quite have the time to get to them. There's 2 EIPs, so people can review those async. And then, Mikhail, you had the SafeHead proposal. I don't know if 2 minutes is enough, or if you'd want to point people as well towards an async place to discuss.
I can do a very short overview. Yeah, and then we can move to a sync discussion. So yeah, we have the work in progress on the prototype of the fast confirmation rule in a couple of CL clients. So now is the time to decide how we will expose the fast confirm block to the blockchain data consumers. And there are basically several options to do that. First one is to repurpose the safe block for the fast confirmed block. This is the easiest one because we will not need to change the engine API. We will not need to change the JSON-RPC API. And just to recall, to remind everyone that the safe block was introduced for the purpose of fast confirmations. But it's been a long time ago, and yeah, it's been a justified block for almost 3 years. So some data consumers can basically rely on that safe block means justified, and yeah, that might impact them. And yeah, this is basically the default option. The other one will be to introduce the fast confirmed block hash to the engine API and fast confirmed block tag to JSON-RPC API, which is more intrusive from the API standpoint. And the third option would be to make the safe block, the semantics of the safe block, depending on the runtime configuration of the CL client. So this has some implications because the basically safe block semantics will depend on the node operator and on the node configuration, which might be prone to misconfiguration and other things. So yeah, but if you're a safe block consumer and you're listening to us, please reach out to us in the ETHR&D Discord in the JSON-RPC API channel, because this change might affect you. Thanks.
Okay, Thank you. Let's wrap up here. And yeah, we can discuss DevNet 5 progress on Monday's testing call. But yeah, thanks everyone.